Hello, everyone. This is Jawad, your host at Kingdom of Dreams podcast. Welcome back to another episode. In today's conversation, I have a guest who's also a colleague. Her name is Hemal Trivedi. Today, we're here to talk about her film Yatra, which means the journey. And I had the pleasure of seeing it last month at a screening in Washington, D.C. And it was such an incredible film. It's a short documentary. It is one of the most amazing films I've seen. It's very powerful, it's to the point, and it really, really generated a lot of emotions for the audiences, including myself. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Himal Trivedi for Yatra.
So I was born and raised in a very modest, in a very conservative Hindu Brahmin family. My grandfather was a priest of a temple. And my mom, she got married off at a very typical age of 18, at a very young age of 18. And somehow she and my father did not get along with each other. And my father left my mother at a very like when she was soon after she gave birth to me in the like she was in the hospital when my father left, actually, the marriage. He walked out of the marriage, and my mom was 21 when she gave birth to me, and my father was like 20 to 23. So they were both kids. And in that society, although I was born in Mumbai, in Mumbai there can be some very conservative ethnic enclaves, very conservative pockets, and I was in a very conservative Hindu pocket of Mumbai, in a suburb of Mumbai called Dahisar. It's like the Bronx of Mumbai. And so after my father walked away, my mother was shunned by the society. She was like treated like this woman who had no man protector, no man to protect her. And we kind of like nobody would rent her a house. We would go from one living situation to another living situation to a third living situation. And so we used to live in these. There are these things called chawls. I don't know if you know that. Chawl is like a very Mumbai thing where a lot of houses, like they're like container size house, uh, like houses with like shared toilets and stuff. So I was born and raised in that environment, and it was very confusing to me, because I like growing up, the world was such a messy place. Like the right was not right, the wrong was not wrong, the good was not good, the bad was not bad. I did not know what to like interpret of this world. It was just a very messy situation. And what I used to do is I used to find my escapes in storytelling. So I used to write stories, and some of those stories used to also get published. So I used to write short poems, I used to write short stories, and I was really good at like poetry and storytelling. And um, but then I was also good academically. So my mom put me. So I got into science because I was good academically. So when I entered, like when I was right after high school, I joined a science college, and my mom put me in a college to study microbiology in the hopes that I would be in the medical profession, and or the healthcare profession. And then I did not. I hated microbiology. So as an escape, I used to still write stories and write poems. And then after that, because I hated microbiology so much, I did another practical thing. Is I went and I joined the business school of India. So I joined one of India's top. It was one of India's top five business schools, and I was very lucky to get scholarship to enter. So because I was good academically and I'm naturally competitive, so I could get through that. I could get through that door, and here I was like, in this most one of the most elite colleges of Mumbai, and there was a complete upward mobility for me. Like I was coming from nothing, but I was interacting with people who came from like tremendous amounts of wealth. So I saw what I mean, I did not have wealth, but I saw what money can do to your life and what money brings to your life, and I really enjoyed it. And I was like, okay, let me just indulge in this a little. So after I finished my business school, I joined mutual funds, and very soon, like my first job out of campus, and I was given a decent apartment in a decent neighborhood in India, in Mumbai. There was like a two-bedroom apartment, and with like all facilities that you can think of. And I was just very quickly content materially. I became very quickly satisfied by what material wealth can do to you. And it was a very, very nice life until I reached a point where I wasn't quite like, I wasn't quite happy with what I was doing. Like the kida, like the disease of dissatisfaction was stuck in my head. And I was like, oh, this is so easy. I can do this. This is so easy. Let me just like, I just didn't feel challenged anymore. And so I decide, and I was also in a relationship at that time, and it wasn't quite working out. And, I had a bad breakup, and all that kind of culminated into this place where I just said, I need to do something else. And so, just out of this whim of my heart, I said, and then I accidentally just watched Harlem County, USA. It's a documentary by Barbara Koppel. And I was like, oh, I can do this. This sounds like fun. I can do this. Let me do this. And so I just like Googled how to be a documentary filmmaker, and bunch of universities came up. One of them was University of Florida, Gainesville, which had a documentary program. So, and I got a scholarship. So I went to Florida to study journalism and documentary films. That's how it all began. It's a very strange, random journey. And then I haven't changed my career since. I mean, but so at by 25, I think at 25 I landed in Florida. This all this history happened by the time I was 25.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, you and I know each other, but I never knew the story.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. No, it's very strange how, you know, the things that you did as a child to make sense of the world, like I still do the same thing to make sense of the world, and the world still doesn't make sense to me. So,
yeah. Yeah, no, one of the things I really like about what you said, and it's so true, and I have these conversations with people, and I'm sure you do too, is that, yes, having the money part is very important because that's what make the world go around. But after a certain point, I think deep down in all of us, even if we don't say it out loud, we all want to do things that challenge us because that's what makes life exciting and purposeful.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Um, your filmmaking started, if correct me if I'm wrong, I think you one of your earlier films that you worked on that got recognition was Saving Faith, right? Am I correct? The one that won the Oscar?
Yeah, 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 yeah. So I edited that film. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. How did you land on that film? Because I remember watching that film before it won the Oscar somewhere. I don't know where it was, in a festival or somewhere. How did you get onto that project?
So this is again another story. So right out of journalism school, I was hired by this company called Odyssey Networks, and it was a company that produced, and I was a producer editor, and my job was to tell stories that would build bridges of understanding in conflict zones in the world, which is a very tall order for a 20 something old, right? It's like, oh, let's make stories that will change the world. Uh, so for in like that period that I was there in Odyssey Networks, I did so many short films. It was all short form storytelling, and it was the beginning of this web series, this short form. So they wanted to join. They were like one of the first ones who used to make 3 minute long films and 2 minute long films, and I made I think in that period of time when I was with RDC Networks, I made 51 short films. Like, 2-minute films, 3-minute films, but short films. And so I did a lot of stories. I did a story on North Sudan, South Sudan partition, then Nigeria and the civil war in Nigeria, then earthquake in Haiti, then Arab Spring and Coptic Christian population in Egypt, then Mumbai terror attacks, the aftermath of Mumbai terror attacks. Then I did something in Pakistan also. I think there was earthquake. I think there was earthquake. Yeah. So there was earthquake during the same period of time. So I did a story on that. Then a lot of domestic stories about, you know, uh, the Muslim boys, then politics of hunger, then gentrification, a lot of stories. And so I basically became really fast because I had to churn out so many stories at such a fast pace that I became a machine. And I was like, dun, 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 dun. The storytelling was like so fast for me. I was churning out, I think, three short stories a week. And I had literally like reached a point where I had forgotten. All the countries started blurring. All the countries became one. Like I forgot where was the civil war. I forgot which country had the genocide. I forgot where who's getting discriminated. I became so desensitized to everything that was happening around me that I needed to take a break. So I took a break. It was a very good job, by the way, Jawad. It's like, one of those jobs with benefits and all the things that I still don't have in my life. So it was a very comfortable place. I should have like stayed there in hindsight. But I, of course, that Kida, that disease or whatever
That
of
disease, yep.
the disease was like I was stung by it again. And so I left it and I sat, I was just sitting. And then I was like, what did I do? Like, did I make a mistake? And I got this, I just got offered this job to edit for HBO, this the documentary Saving Face. And I did not know what to expect out of it, but they really needed an Urdu speaking editor. And back then, at least, there were not many like me. I think I was probably the only one who like was native Urdu speaking, native Urdu Hindi speaking, and had was a skillful editor. So I got hired, and I was hired as an assistant editor, but then I did well, so I got promoted to an editor, and I was like, that's how I got my lucky break. It was just random coincidence again. The director said, "Would you be willing to travel to Denver to edit?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I did have kids back then. I had nothing, so I'm like, "Sure, I'll come to Denver if you pay for it." So I went.
Yeah, it's interesting you talked about you said something, and before we go on Yatra, your current film, you said something about that disease. And I think everybody goes through that. For me, it's always about being complacent. The moment you start feeling complacent in whatever that you're doing, and even in film production or production in general, there are different angles, different facets of jobs, right?
Yeah,
And I've had that feeling from 96 to no sorry 97 to 2007, 2007 2008 to 2016, 17, and every 10 years. And that third chapter of being complacent, I feel is in this sort of in the midst of it right now, because I think you need change. You want to try different things and you want to be challenged. So it's good that you have that disease because it's very necessary, I think.
yeah. I mean, you know what? I don't even know. I lose my mind when I'm complacent. Like if I'm not challenged, I feel like I'm dead. Like I
Yeah.
drive
No,
everybody crazy. I pick fights for no reason because I'm like, ugh, this is
I
I
I
need to
get it.
be.
I
Yeah.
get it.
And you get it,
I
right? It's like that. I always And like people around me said, "Who told you to do this?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just had to do it."
Yeah, I don't know if you know this, between 2009 and 2017, I used to run this very successful South Asian wedding cinematography company.
Oh my
We
God.
we shot weddings in maybe 15 countries, India, Norway, Nigeria,
Wow.
UK. Like it was, and I people used to ask me, how long are you gonna go this for? I'm like, as soon as I start feeling complacent, and there was that moment when I felt complacent, and boom, and that was it. And then COVID happened, and done, pat over with that world. But that was, I mean, it was really good business. It was really like doing high end weddings and traveling around the world and doing really well. But it just, again, that disease, you know, it
Yeah,
just
it's a
came in.
disease.
Yeah. So I saw Yatra, which means the journey, your most recent film, a short documentary in Washington D.C. while you were showing it. I think Voices for Women, is that the organization? If I'm
No,
not
I think
mistaken.
it's Vital Voices.
Vital Voices. And before I talk about it and ask you questions, just tell me about how that took place and how you started that journey of making a film, which is translated into the word journey.
Ah, so now this is again it's again one of the stories of chances, right? Um, so I was coming out of my maternity leave with my second child. So Palash is now 5.5. So this was when Palash was like about 8 months old or 9 months old, I think. Or and I was just coming out of my maternity leave, and Matt Alesevich, my co-director on it, he was looking for an editor to edit a sizzle for the footage that he had shot with Indian American doctors who would go to India to on medical missions. And my name comes up as an editor because I have been around for a very long time. And the first question I asked Matt is like, so the moment Matt approached me with this job, I was like, but I was like, I knew it was a low stakes job. Like I wasn't ready to take like a heavy duty network television job because those jobs are very demanding. They expect you to work 15, 16 hours a day. And I wasn't ready for that. I wanted to enjoy the childhood of my child and, wanted to be a mother for some time. And this job just seemed very easy to me of editing a sizzle. And I asked Matt, do you have money to pay me? I mean, so he said he did. And I'm like, oh, then sure, I'll edit. I had no problems editing. So I edited it, and it was very easy to edit that. And there's nothing new. Like, healthcare in India is fucked up. Everybody knows that. Like, I'm an Indian, I'm a native Indian who grew up in a ghetto. So I know about poverty more intimately than anybody else does. I know the politics behind nonprofits. I know the nonprofit industrial complex. So I was like, oh, this is one of those white savior films, this white savior and who's like, oh, all these poor people, I need to go and save them right now. And all these Indian American doctors, they're just going to come and they're just going to set up this camps and they're just going to leave and it's just going to be as devastated as it was. Like I mean, I already like I had nothing. There was no sense of exotic for me. It's not new. So, but I edited it, and that sizzle was really like Matt was really happy with it, and he was able to fundraise with it. And I was really surprised. Uh, and then he kept asking me questions about what should I do now? What should I do this? What should I do? And I was like, Matt, if you're asking me all these questions, I said, first and foremost, let's be honest. There's no story here. You have footage of a lot of Indian American doctors going back and helping poor people, but helping for what? Like there's no depth in terms of you have a lot of characters, but you haven't gone deeper. So let's like, let's just go back to the basics, right? And then Matt was like ready to go along on the ride. And, and also another thing happened, Jawad. At that point of time, I had two children. So I had my Palash, who's 5.5 now, and and Satya, my older kid, who's 12 now. And so he was 7 back then. 7 or 8, I think. 8. So I had two young children. And at that time, I was also like, I had two old people staying with me. I had my mother and my mother in law. And I was caring for 4 people at that time. So I was like, so Yatra was like my only creative vent, because there was no way in hell I would have been able to take any full-time job. It was impossible. Uh, although I did edit a series in between, but that came a little later.
What
But
year was this?
what?
What year was this when you were in
So
this
this is
time period?
2020, 2021. This is before we met.
Okay.
But I edited a series called Philly DA in between. It was 2022. I edited Philly DA. Or 20, I don't remember. But so that was because Palash had like when he reached 1.5 year, I did that. So this was Yatra was like my only creative event. And Matt, being Matt, he's just such a sweet guy. He just has this purest intentions, right? I just like he like I didn't like he's one of those very few people who do not have this giant ego. Uh, and I think Matt was the one who like really pulled me in. His energy pulled me in. Um, so I did want. So I mean it was like some of my strengths, which is like my biggest strength is identifying a story, and I'm very instinctive. Like I almost instinctively know this is going to be the story, and this is how this person is going to pop in the on the camera. This person is going to be a star. This like my instincts tell me that. So I was instinctively drawn to Annie. I was like, of all your doctors, she's the only one who is going through a transformative journey. Just follow her. Don't follow anybody else. Drop all other doctors. They're all boring. Sorry.
No, no, it's good that you're mentioning this because I remember when you and I were working together. At the time, you told me about this documentary where a group of doctors go to India, and then when I saw the film, I was like, "What happened to the group of doctors?" But
I know, they were all boring. So I was like, they're all boring. So Annie's the most interesting person. She's authentic, she's raw, she carries her heart on her sleeve. She's emotionally available. She is the person who is like this perfect, you know, subject for a documentary. I sound very strange here. I mean, it sounds very strange, but she is this person who allows herself to be vulnerable in other and doesn't is not afraid of sharing her vulnerability. Like a lot of people are so afraid of being vulnerable and being authentic that they put up a facade. And Annie doesn't. Annie has so much authenticity and her own personal story, right? Of losing a child, losing her mother as a teenager, and then wanting to change, having this wide-eyed utopian dream of like changing India's healthcare system, and then her own personal journey is so amazing that I was just drawn to her energy. And so, so then the first shoot of Yatra, it was around COVID. So I think that it was a second shoot. I mean, of this present story, actually. So when I went to India, it was peak COVID, and Matt couldn't get a visa to go to India. So because it was during that lockdown period, and when I went to India, I was just so I was like, Matt, I'll go to India, but then I am going to be a co-director. I just cannot be like this person who goes and gets all this story for you, and then you just like, you can't just like be then, okay, thank you, bye bye. You can't just do that. I mean, I'm risking my life. I'm going to a foreign
Of course.
country. I'm not. I'm going during lockdown
Yeah.
and leaving my 1.5-year-old child behind, and to tell a story that's your passion. So he's like, sure. So I went, right, and I saw Farida, and of all the people in the crowd, Farida popped like a star. She's just so like she like literally pops, and I was like, this girl is amazing. She's like, she's sassy, she is witty, she's beautiful, and she's like so stylish, and she's completely unhinged, like uninhibited. She's not camera shy. She has no like inhibition, and I was like, this girl is amazing. She's a performer. She's a natural performer. Like she's a natural star. She doesn't even know that about herself, and so I was so drawn to her that I was like, and at that time we didn't know the story, right? But I was like, I have these two beautiful people. I have Annie and I have Farida, and hopefully, and I'm hoping that there will be a story at some point of time. And the story happened in front of us, and so we became a witness to this story, and I'm so happy that and I think that's why I appreciate Matt as a partner, is because he allowed the story to happen. Like he did not interfere with the story. Like he wasn't stuck with his vision and said, no, 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 but my film is about this. Like he never did that. He submitted to the process, to the madness of documentary filmmaking. And I think that is the beauty of documentary filmmaking, is like, in documentary filmmaking, you submit. You don't interfere. When the story is unfolding in front of you, you just step aside and watch and document and let it reveal itself and be surprised. And that's been the journey on Yatra.
About the documentary part that you said, it's, I was talking to somebody about this couple of weeks ago, and I was telling them, and I'm sure you can agree with this, is that when you're making a documentary, it's kind of like life, right? Like you're born and you die.
Yeah.
Those are two certainties. You just don't know when are you going to die and what's going to happen between there. In
Yeah.
documentary, the beginning. You kind of know where it might want to be, where you want it to go or where you not want to go, but you have no clue what's going to happen in between. And that
Yeah.
notion of not knowing what's going to happen in between, for me at least, it scares the crap out of me and excites the hell out of me. And that's what really, really makes it so wonderful.
I cannot agree with you more. In fact, you don't even know. Sometimes it's just like life. Sometimes you start with a narrative and you think that's your narrative, and the story is completely different. And you're not even paying attention to the narrative because the narrative is being written somewhere else with someone else. And the only choice you have is to be really, really, truly be present. That's it. That's all you can do, is just trust your instincts and be present and witness. And that's why I love documentary filmmaking so much. There's so much madness in it, but yeah,
It's
it's
crazy.
not sustainable,
It's crazy.
but it's madness.
Yeah, it is so full of madness because, I mean, as you know, I don't know if I ever told you this, but you probably actually know, with Citizen of Moria, when you were, helping me out with it and everything, and as a producer and the first two acts took 2.5 years in real time to sort of unfold. The last act took 1 year, and there was like 8 to 10 different ways the story was going in.
Oh my
And
God.
you keep, improvising and trying to figure out where it's gonna go, and then you have to make a decision. Okay, this is where it is. But again, it's fun, but it's crazy at the same time.
I know, right? And like same thing with Yatra. We thought that the film finished last year when Farida went back to school. And then we're
Right.
like, oh, Farida's getting married. And we're like, okay, now we have a new ending. Farida's getting married. So we have to put that in. So I actually had to fight. That was the only time Matt resisted. Because Matt is like, hey, Mal, we are done. I'm tired. We've already screened the film at a festival. Can we let it go? Can we put a photo? Can we put a text card? And I'm like, no, we have to film Faida's wedding. And I had to fight tooth and nail. Not tooth and nail, I mean, he's very gentle. Uh, but I had to fight to put Faida's wedding in the film. I had to fight to be allowed to go and film Faida's wedding. And I
And
filmed it. And when I came back, I'm like, look, I told you this wedding is the most important scene in the film because this is the one that bridges the gap between utopian idealism and reality.
I couldn't agree with you more because, I mean, you told me this after the screening that this little story, and yes, without the wedding, it probably would have been okay, a decent film, and that's it. That's how I was feeling when I was watching it. Obviously, I didn't know when I was watching it that the ending, the last part, was something that you guys had to sort of have a discussion about. But I also understand Matt's point of view because I'm assuming, started the project way before you became involved, right? So
Exactly.
he's probably just like, okay, this is it. Let's move on to the next one. Is it worth it? But kudos to you for pushing that because I think that's what made the film as it is. Otherwise, it would be just an average film.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Um, let's talk about your next film, where it's at and what's it about. It's called The Half Truths. I mean, I know what's about, but I would love for you to sort of talk about that as much as you like.
Okay. So I started the half truths 12 years ago, which is, it's going to be almost 13 years now, actually. Uh,
When you say you started 12 years ago with production or the
no, no,
concept
the
or
idea. The
okay.
idea started 13 years ago. So I was pregnant with my older son, Satya, oldest, like my 12-year-old now. I was pregnant with him and I was watching a lot of documentaries. I was judging for something or I was reviewing, and I came across this film called Burma VJ. I don't know if you've seen Burma VJ.
No.
It's a film about all these monks getting killed in Burmese civil war.
Is this connected to the Rohingyans or is it something different?
No, no, no. It was before. This is
Okay.
before Rohingya happened. Uh,
Okay.
and then of course the Burmese government, the Buddhist monks came to power, and then the Rohingya happened. Now that's a different story. But this is when Buddhist monks were trying to, like, you know, they were fighting for freedom of religion in Burma, which was a communist country. So the Burma VJ, when I saw it, I just couldn't watch it. It made me like physically sick because there was so much violence. And I was also 7 months pregnant. So I was like, I was obviously like not in a state of mind when I should be watching Burma VJ actually. So I was very, very depressed. And I told my husband that I just want to abort this child. And he's like, what? And I'm like, look, this world is an awful place. I cannot bring a child in this world. This world is not going to be worth living for and worth living in. I was just super depressed at that time. And my husband was like, my husband is very calm and very rational. And he said, you know, how about you put your energy in a direction that will challenge you and channel your energy in a direction that that is not as negative. So I joined this organization called Association for India's Development, which is a sort of I mean, I didn't join it. I went to a few meetings, which is sort of like this, loose think tank of a group of Indian people who were worried about a group of Indian intellectuals actually who were worried about the way India was progressing. So they were worried that India was a socialist country once upon a time. It transition it became a capitalist country in early 2000, and this was like 10 years after that. And so, 10 years of capitalism, India had an upward mobility of 300 million people. India had a lot of growth, but a lot of Indians were also worried about the way the growth was happening, and whether the growth was sustainable for India and sustainable for the planet. So I attended a lot of seminars, and I realized that that there is an internal colonization going on in India, where this middle class is basically colonizing its own people. And I'm a product of middle class, right? I went to public school in India. I went to public college in India. I got a scholarship to attend a business school in India. So my country has invested a lot of money in me. I wouldn't have not been where I am if I did not have public education or access to public education. And so, you know, I was like, I had an upward mobility in my social stature. There's a generation that had an upward mobility in their social stature, and but that happened on the backs of all these uh, people living in rural areas, and the indigenous populations living in forests, and I wasn't aware of it. So I came to know about that, and I came to know about forests that are in central part of India, the south central part of India. So in south central part of India, there's a forest which is as big as the size of the country of Switzerland.
Oh,
It's
wow.
Yeah, it's a huge forest. It's probably the only contiguous forest left, uh, and it is one of the biggest forests in the whole of South Asia. Actually, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, all these countries combined. And in the past decade, that this forest is called the lungs of India. And in the past decade, this forest has seen 37% deforestation, because this forest is home to some of the finest minerals in the world, the finest iron ore, bauxite, tin, coal, diamonds, gold, and there is rampant mining, like completely unhinged mining. Um, and the indigenous population of that forest is completely like destroyed. And nobody even talks about it. They are just like collateral damage, really. So there has been displacement. The official numbers say that the displacement is 500,000 indigenous population, but I'm sure there are many more. Thousands of villages burned down, so many people behind bars. And so I was drawn to that story. And I was like, okay, I want to tell a story about an indigenous population from this forest. And then the indigenous people have like picked up bows and arrows literally to fight the Indian government to defend their forest, which is a joke, really. So I was like, I want to tell a story of um, an indigenous person who is stuck in between this rebel movement and the police. And the people, some of the people who are deep into the activist circles of that forest told me that keep an eye on Soni Sori. She's the protagonist of my film. So, like, keep an eye on her. She's getting framed to be a rebel. A person who's framed to be a rebel is considered terrorist, and they are thrown in the prison forever. And the prisons of India, of that forest, would like make Guantanamo Bay look like Club Med or something. They're just horrific conditions. And Sori Sori, like I found out about Soni Sori even before she was arrested. And then I gave birth, and I kept an eye on Soni Sori and her story. I kept in touch with the legal team who was fighting her case. And as soon as Satya turned 1 year old, and I was like happy to go away from, I mean, I could take a break from my motherhood responsibilities. I decided to just go to the forest and film with Soni Sori. So that's what I did. So after 1 year, when Satya was 1 year old, I went to the forest and I embedded myself in the legal team of Soni Sori, and I went and met her in the prison. So, and then at that point of time, I did not know what the story was going to be. I thought it was going to be a story of this horrible woman to whom horrible things have happened, right? Like she was arrested, raped, tortured, uh, like she was given electric shocks. The sexual assault was so intense that and horrific that people would like shudder at. But I thought that her torture was her story, and it was going to be a piece on how horrible the Chhattisgarh government is. But I kept following, and I kept following the movement to get her freed. And I also filmed the abandoned school where she used to teach and her children. In fact, some of the stuff that I shot with Soni Sori was used by her legal team in her Supreme Court hearing, and for her release. My footage was used to show the abandoned school and everything. And then once she got released, I was like, oh wow, what a positive story, That's the story. She got released. And then she joins politics. And I'm like, oh, that's the story. And then there's corruption in politics. And I was like, that's the story. And then the evasiveness of story kept happening until almost 2 years ago when, she got finally acquitted from all her charges by the Indian government. She's no longer a rebel. And she also got, she became this leader, the only leader in Chhattisgarh, really, who is a big unifying force for about 200,000 indigenous people. And she has gotten 250 people out of prison, and she has prevented 1,500 arrests. And she has been able to stop the deforestation and mining of her little corner of the forest, of this one mountain called Nandaraj Pahad that the indigenous people call considered to be sacred. So that's now I think the story's over. So I think now I finally finished filming. And last year we filmed a lot of like atmospheric stuff and a lot of like we had a long shoot and we filmed uh, like the way of life of indigenous people. Before that, a lot of my filming was just really like following the action of what was going on with Soni Sori. So that's the next film. We presented it at Gotham Film Week 3 weeks ago. Before that, we were at FIFDH in Switzerland, and we also have received a few grants. We are hoping to receive more grants.
That's amazing. I mean, what a great story, and it kind of goes back to what you said about Yatra, that how you wanted to continue, with that film, and it's the same path that happened with this one, where the things kept happening and you kept evolving with it. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's
Amazing.
just
So
like
what?
life, right? But I mean, in all honesty, Jawad, I don't think I have energy and patience to tell another story. So after this, I'm done. I think I can't do. But anyways, that's a different story.
You're done with documentaries, or you're done with film?
I don't know. I might be done with documentaries.
You
It's
know,
because,
it's interesting you mentioned that, because I mean, I told you about the narrative, right? That I'm
yeah,
working
yeah,
on,
I'm
and
writing a narrative script now. Yeah.
it's just that complacency. Like, I've done documentaries for good, 8, 9 years, maybe 10 years, and now it's like, okay,
I'm sorry, what are you saying? I can't hear you very well.
Sorry, I was saying that, it's that complacency. Like, I did documentaries from 2013 up until last year, and not that I don't want to do any more documentaries, but it's just like I want to do something different where I can create and, put that out there in the world, just through a narrative way.
Yeah, that's my son.
Oh, hey.
Palash. Palash, you want to say hello to Jawad? Come. Okay. Come. He's this 5-year-old. Palash, don't sit on my
That's okay. Hey, Katash, how are you, man? How are you doing? Good, good. Well, I hope that you switch to narrative because I do think that switching from documentary to narrative is a lot easier as opposed to switching from narrative to documentary.
Yeah, I kind of feel that's what I've heard from everybody. It's like, uh, I mean, I do have the basic storytelling skills. I don't have to worry about. A lot of people say that, and this is again somebody. I'm basically, I'm delusionally optimistic about life. So this is this is my delusional optimism probably, but I. A lot of people say that the skills that you've acquired as a documentary filmmaker, which is being present, being adaptive, being like flexible, always doing things on the fly. They're very much suited for this new genre of indie filmmaking, which is on the rise, which is the only thing that's giving the highest return on investment. That's what everybody tells me, that the highest return of investment nowadays is in the indie film market, and you have the skills for it. And I'm like, yes.
It's so true because it's you always do when you do something like in I'm just speaking about the film world or production world. I probably couldn't have done documentaries in terms of the act of the just adapting to the changes if I had not done 10 years of wedding cinematography and wedding editing storytelling around the world, because in that you're filming everything real time, so that helps with that. But now this will help with the next step for people who are
Exactly.
trying to transform.
Yeah, and
Amazing.
I mean, another thing is like I feel like my business degree is coming to help now, because I'm learning very quickly that the business of art is not about art, it's about business. And as an artist, for my own survival, I need to be a good businesswoman. Otherwise, at the point where I am at in my career, if I don't learn the skills of business, I'm going to be doomed.
It's funny you mentioned that because I went into business management and information technology, and I remember telling my dad, I remember this. Why do I need to do this? I will never do business in my life. And he was so right that that's all I've been doing. And it's coming back to me now too. It's like sort of that idea of, okay, now you got to figure out all these little pieces as opposed to just focusing on one thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I used to be very snobbish about it. I'm like, oh, money, material wealth. Oh, what's the point of it? Da 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 da. Now I'm like, I mean, I've been like fucked over a couple of times in documentary films, and you see that, I don't have such a utopian worldview of people in documentary films. I've had like a mixed bag of treatments. And I'm like, I better be good at business now. I better learn how to do business.
And one good thing about that part is, again, something I've learned over the last 2, 3 years is that if you go into trying to raise capital from a business standpoint, chances of raising that capital is much more easier than the other way because people want their ROI, right? They want their money back essentially.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think it's yeah, I think being clever, you just have to like do that heavy lifting. You just have to suck it up. So I really just compartmentalize my time, like my grandfather, who was a classical Indian, he was a Indian classical singer, and he was a priest in a temple. He was very idealistic. And my grandfather used to always say that, you have two goddesses in Hindu mythology. There are two goddesses. And there are many goddesses, but the two goddesses that my grandfather always used to worship. One is goddess Lakshmi, which is the goddess of wealth, and the other is goddess Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge. And my grandfather used to say, never worship Lakshmi and Saraswati together because yeah, he's like, because they will always compete with each other. So when you're worshipping Lakshmi, just worship Lakshmi and be her slave. And when you worship Saraswati, just worship Saraswati and be her slave. In the moment of worship, just be very, very clear about whom you're worshiping and why. And be authentic with your pursuit of with that worship. Because if you start worshipping Saraswati with Lakshmi in mind, Saraswati is going to be annoyed and you're not going to be happy, and vice versa, right? So I sort of do that. I kind of execute that in my philosophy in my life. And I actually, I wear many hats now. I wear a hat of a producer, but I also wear a hat of an artist. But when I'm wearing a hat of an artist, I am a pure artist. I'm a purist. But when I am wearing a hat of a producer, I'm a pure producer. I'm a purist there as well. So it's almost like having a split personality.
No, it's true. And going back to, when you're making any film, I'm sure you had that. I'm sure I had that. I know I did. Is that, you're trying to figure out a film and you don't have the money that you need, and you're like, okay, let's just go and do it and try to figure that out as you go along. But now it's like, no, we need the money first, and then we will go, right? Because it's a whole time thing, and it's about making sure everybody's paid and all that. Yes, if it's such a groundbreaking story that nobody's touching, and if you grab on it without any funding, yeah, sure. But those times are, it's tough. It's tough to do that. It's not
Exactly.
impossible.
Exactly. So you need to get your act together. It's like before you choose to give birth to that child, make sure you have a nanny fund. Otherwise, your child is not going to have childcare.
Well, it's
Yeah.
not just even about giving birth to that child, but it's also marketing that child, right? Like the
Marketing,
promotion,
yeah. Paying for the
promotion,
bills, paying for the piano classes, paying for this, paying for that,
everything.
everything.
Yeah, yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much, Himal. This has been great. I really appreciate your time. Looking forward to chatting on many more projects in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Jawan.